Judge Judy thought she could humiliate a sitting congresswoman on national television. But when she tried to shame Jasmine Crockett, she triggered a calm, devastating legal takedown that flipped the power dynamic live. What started as a stunt ended in silence. Judge Judy's. The courtroom gasped. And history was made in 60 unforgettable seconds. Before we get to this explosive moment, tell us where you're watching from. And if you believe truth still matters, hit subscribe. We've got another jaw-dropping story coming tomorrow. The lights were hot, the cameras were rolling, and every seat in the courtroom was filled. This wasn't a normal day on Judge Judy. This was a special episode, one the producers marketed as a showdown between old-school courtroom discipline and rising political fire. Sitting at the defendant's table was Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett, her posture calm, her expression unreadable. Across from her, Judge Judy Shendlin, a television icon known for steamrolling guests with cutting one-liners and no-nonsense authority. From the moment Judge Judy took her seat, the tension was thick. She didn't wait long to strike. Her voice sliced through the studio. "Congresswoman Crockett," she began, holding her notes like a weapon. "I've seen your performances in Congress. Frankly, I think you need to learn a little respect for people who've actually earned their place." The audience tensed. Some shifted uncomfortably, others leaned in. The tone wasn't judicial, it was personal. Everyone expected a flustered response, maybe even a retreat. Instead, Crockett met her gaze directly and replied, her voice cool and steady. "With all due respect, Judge, I think you should check your facts before you come for me." A wave of gasps rippled through the room. For the first time in years, Judge Judy's courtroom was thrown off balance. What followed wasn't loud or chaotic. It was precise, professional, and unforgettable. Crockett didn't shout. She didn't flinch. She slowly dismantled the courtroom's assumed power dynamic, and the moment went viral in real time. In less than 24 hours, clips of the exchange had racked up millions of views. Judge Judy had expected to teach a lesson. Instead, she got one. And America witnessed something it never thought it would see. Someone calmly putting the queen of courtroom TV on the defensive and winning. Before she was Judge Judy, she was Judith Shendlin, a Brooklyn-born daughter of hard-edged New York grit. Her upbringing didn't tolerate softness, and law school in the 1960s was anything but welcoming to women. But Judy didn't flinch. She earned her stripes as a New York family court prosecutor, then a judge, where she earned a reputation for moving fast, cutting deep, and never showing an ounce of doubt. Her philosophy was simple: talk less, rule quicker, tolerate nothing. In 1996, she made the leap to television. Judge Judy wasn't just a court show, it became a cultural force. Viewers tuned in to watch her dismantle defendants with sarcasm and scorn, her one-liners becoming household quotes. She wasn't the judge who explained the law. She was the judge who ended the argument. With a scowl and a soundbite, she kept order. That act made her the highest-paid woman in television history. But behind the success was a truth rarely acknowledged. She never had to defend her opinions in real court again. Her rulings on TV weren't precedent, they were performance. Her decisions weren't scrutinized, they were edited. That she still believed in her own mythology. That her decades on television translated to real-world authority. That her cultural dominance meant legal dominance. So when she watched Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett grill federal judges and question Supreme Court ethics, something inside her bristled. She didn't see constitutional oversight. She saw disrespect. To Judy, people like Crockett weren't courtroom professionals. They were showboaters. In her eyes, experience was sacred. Titles demanded deference, and she was sure Crockett had neither the humility nor the respect to understand real power. What she didn't anticipate was that Jasmine didn't just understand power. She understood where it came from and how to challenge it. Judge Judy had made a career humiliating guests who didn't know better. But Jasmine Crockett wasn't a guest. She was an elected official, a trained litigator, and someone who had spent years battling real systems, not studio audiences. And when the gavel dropped, Judy wasn't ready for someone she couldn't silence. Jasmine Crockett never needed a television show to earn her authority. She built it in real courtrooms, representing real people, many of whom the system had forgotten. Born and raised in St. Louis, she worked her way through the University of Houston Law Center, where she was one of the few black women in her class. The stakes were always higher for her, not just to succeed, but to prove she belonged. Her early legal career was forged in the fire of civil rights defense. She represented clients who couldn't afford PR campaigns, who were mistreated by institutions that never expected to be questioned. In every courtroom, she saw the same thing: power assumed and rarely earned. So she learned to fight, not with theatrics, but with facts. Jasmine didn't step into Congress through a family dynasty or insider connections. She ran for office on a shoestring campaign and outworked her way into the Texas legislature. From there, she won a seat in Congress, where she became known for asking the kind of questions that made witnesses squirm. But it wasn't rage. It was precision. In Washington, she became the quiet storm. Her opponents often underestimated her, until they found themselves face to face with a line of questioning that left no room to run. She cross-examined with calm intensity. She exposed contradictions with a paper trail. Her delivery wasn't emotional, but her impact was devastating. She didn't crave camera time, but she didn't run from it either. And that's why Judge Judy misunderstood her completely. Jasmine knew the difference between spectacle and substance. She also knew the difference between TV authority and real constitutional power. So when she agreed to appear on a special episode of Judge Judy's show, she wasn't there to play along. She was there to defend her principles. Judge Judy wanted to deliver a lesson about respect. Jasmine Crockett had one ready too, one based not on personal ego but on constitutional law and lived experience. She'd been talked down to before. She'd been underestimated before. But each time, she sharpened her skills. And now, she was ready to show what real authority looked like, under pressure, under scrutiny, and with the receipts to back it up. The lights above the courtroom set burned bright, but the real heat was coming from the bench. Judge Judy leaned forward, her fingers steepled, eyes sharp with calculated disdain. "Congresswoman Crockett," she began, her tone thick with condescension. "I've been practicing law since before you were even in grade school. I've seen every kind of grandstander there is." The audience chuckled nervously. Judy wasn't just throwing shade, she was swinging a gavel made of ego. Her reputation was built on shredding people before they even opened their mouths. But Jasmine Crockett didn't blink. She folded her hands, looked Judy in the eye. "With all due respect, Your Honor, I've spent my career defending the rights you stopped fighting for years ago. And unlike this set field, my courtroom didn't come with cameras." There was a subtle gasp. The studio tension, once playful, turned electric. This wasn't daytime television anymore. This was ideological warfare. Judge Judy's mouth twitched. "Don't patronize me, young lady. I earned this seat, with decades of experience." Crockett leaned slightly forward, her voice steady and precise. "And I earned mine in federal courtrooms protecting real people, not in front of a production crew." Murmurs. One crew member visibly swallowed. Judge Judy shifted. Her usual them, insult, flustered reply, takedown, wasn't landing. Crockett wasn't flinching. She was matching the judge moment for moment with something far more dangerous than snark, facts and lived experience. "I don't question your experience," Crockett added calmly. "But I do question whether experience alone guarantees wisdom. Some of the worst rulings in American history came from very experienced judges." That landed. The studio fell quiet. Judy raised an eyebrow, clearly irritated. "I've maintained order and discipline longer than you've held office." Crockett didn't smile. She didn't flinch. "And I've upheld constitutional rights longer than you've worn that robe on TV." The fire had been lit. But Crockett didn't throw flames. She froze the room with clarity. The power dynamic was shifting, and for the first time, in her televised reign, Judge Judy felt it slipping. The audience knew this wasn't going to be like any Judge Judy episode they'd ever seen. Crockett didn't raise her voice. She raised a folder, thick with court transcripts and appellate rulings. The folder hit the table with a soft thud that somehow silenced the entire room. Then she looked directly at Judge Judy. "You said earlier that I don't understand the law. Let's walk through some of yours." Judge Judy squinted, shifting in her seat for the first time. This wasn't on the script. Crockett pulled the first sheet from the folder. "This is a 1987 decision you issued as a family court judge in New York, denying a single mother full custody while citing, and I quote, a pattern of poor personal judgment rather than legal merit." The audience froze. Judy's face twitched. 3 years later, Crockett continued, that decision was overturned on appeal. The appellate court noted your ruling lacked sufficient legal grounding and relied too heavily on personal opinion. "You're out of line," Judy snapped, her voice rising an octave. "This is not your courtroom, and I won't be put on trial." Crockett's reply was crisp. "I'm not putting you on trial, Your Honor. I'm reminding you that this robe," she gestured, "doesn't make you immune to accountability. We both swore to uphold the law, not our egos." A ripple moved through the audience. Judge Judy tried to recover. "That case was unique, and I stand by the reasoning." "Even when the appellate court didn't," Crockett countered, sliding forward another document. "Here's another. A 1991 case where your ruling was overturned for lack of consideration for statutory requirements. Same pattern. Personal judgment over precedent." The tension now was surgical. Crockett wasn't shouting, insulting, or grandstanding. She was performing a constitutional autopsy, and the subject was Judge Judy's legal credibility. "You've built a career on sound bites and spectacle," Crockett said, "but real law doesn't cut to commercial." Judge Judy, visibly rattled, leaned back. "I came here prepared," Crockett added, softly but with authority. "Because unlike entertainment, the law has consequences." And for the first time in her career, Judge Judy wasn't just losing control, she was losing the argument. The room felt colder now. Judge Judy, still seated high on her television bench, tried to reclaim her authority with one final warning. "You're skating on thin ice, Congresswoman. This is my courtroom." Crockett didn't flinch. She stood slowly, placing both hands on the table. Her voice never rose. It didn't need to. "No, Your Honor, it's not." You could hear a pin drop. "This is a television set. These are studio lights. That robe you're wearing is a costume now, not a seat of constitutional power." She reached into her folder and pulled out a copy of the U.S. Constitution, placing it on the table in front of her. "You're not my judge," Crockett continued. "You're a retired jurist playing one for entertainment. I respect what you've built, but let's not pretend this setting gives you the right to question my service in Congress." Judge Judy's eyes flared. "I've earned the right to speak to disrespectful public officials however I please." Crockett didn't blink. "Respect isn't owed, it's earned, and your robe doesn't change that." Gasps rippled across the studio. Phones were out. Clips were already being recorded and uploaded. A moment had just happened, and everyone in the room knew it. "You said I don't understand institutions," Crockett added, lifting the Constitution gently. "But this is the institution I serve. One rooted in checks and balances. One that grants Congress the authority to oversee, and if necessary, challenge, every branch of government, including the judiciary." Judge Judy tried to speak, but the words stalled. The control she had over the courtroom, over the audience, even over herself, was gone. "This may look like a courtroom," Crockett said, her voice steady as stone, "but only one of us is still accountable to the Constitution." She sat down, folded her hands, and looked directly at Judge Judy. No further words were needed. In that moment, It wasn't just a viral clapback. It was the visual collapse of institutional pretense and the rise of a new kind of authority, grounded not in performance, but in principle. The studio was silent, not from fear, but from tension that gripped every corner of the room. Judge Judy, visibly shaken by Crockett's prior constitutional rebuttals, had crossed a line. She thought she was controlling the tempo. Instead, she'd awakened something far more dangerous than disrespect: precision. Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett adjusted her mic. Not flustered, not angry, composed. She addressed neither the judge nor the crowd first. She addressed the law. "Let's revisit what this is really about," she began, holding up a pocket copy of the U.S. Constitution. Article 1, Section 8 of the Constitution grants Congress the power of oversight. Not as a courtesy, not as a formality, as a duty. She looked directly at Judge Judy now. "So while you may view my actions in congressional hearings as performance, what I'm doing is called governance. What you're doing here is television." Murmurs. Cameras panned across the audience, where the disbelief was slowly turning into admiration. Judy tried to interrupt. "This is still my courtroom." But Crockett didn't flinch. "With respect," she said smoothly, "this isn't your courtroom. It's a production set. You are not an active judge. You're a television arbitrator. And I came here today not as a guest, not as a defendant, but as an elected official fulfilling my oversight role. Even here." She stood, voice steady, tone low. "And let's not confuse theatrical critique with legal challenge. I've been in actual courtrooms, places without audiences, places with real consequences. I've stood beside teenage girls accused of assault because they fought back against abusers. I've defended black and brown children wrongly charged because of systemic failure. I didn't have a producer. I had evidence. I had law." Flashbacks poured into the audience's minds. Crockett, at 28 years old, arguing in defense of a 14-year-old girl criminalized for defending herself against a violent foster parent. At 32, saving a young teen from a life sentence by proving prosecutorial misconduct. Her face in those moments, composed, focused, relentless. "These weren't just legal cases," Crockett said. "They were lives. Girls who were told they'd never win. Girls who had no one until I showed up with my legal pad and said, 'We're going to fight, and we're going to win, because the Constitution is still on our side.'" She paused, letting it sit. "You claim to have built your reputation on cutting through nonsense, but I've built mine on cutting through injustice." Judy looked stunned, blinking slowly. She opened her mouth to report, but nothing came. Crockett turned back to the audience one last time in that moment. "Respect isn't just about age, reputation, or who gets the last word. It's about what you fight for when no one is watching, when there are no ratings, no applause. Just truth." For the first time in her long-running career, Judge Judy wasn't the center of attention. Jasmine Crockett had seized it, not through noise, but through knowledge. Not by yelling, but by standing taller in the silence. Judge Judy, visibly unsettled, leaned forward and tried to reclaim the room with one last swipe. "You walk into my courtroom with folders and fire, but what I see is a politician who wants a viral clip. You're not here for justice. You're here for headlines." It was a familiar tactic. Reduce your opponent to ambition. Frame their conviction as self-promotion. But Jasmine Crockett didn't blink. "Headlines," she echoed, then slowly leaned forward. "Let's talk about who's chasing headlines." She held up a glossy promotional flyer from Judge Judy's network. It was a full-color ad for the episode they were filming, with Crockett's name in bold, her congressional title in gold, and the tagline, "Can America's toughest judge silence Congress's loudest voice?" "You invited me here," Crockett continued, her tone sharp but controlled. "You wrote the title. You built this around the idea that you'd put me in my place. You're the one who monetized this, Meanwhile, I came with a copy of the Constitution. The audience stirred. Judge Judy looked down, but Crockett wasn't done. I make $174,000 0 cents a year. You're reportedly worth $500 million. If this is about fame or money, I think we both know who wins that contest. The line didn't land like an insult. It landed like a mirror. This isn't personal, Judge, she added. It's principle. Judy tried again, reaching for generational superiority. The problem with your generation is you think you invented justice. You don't know what it means to earn it. Crockett's voice turned cold. You want to talk about earning justice? She opened her folder again, this time pulling out a black and white photo, a grainy courtroom image from her early days as a public defender. A young Crockett, standing alone, facing a jury of 12 in a racially charged assault case where a teenage girl had been accused of attacking an officer. Crockett won that case. The girl went home. The system didn't thank her, but the family did. I earned it when I stood beside clients who were told they didn't matter. I earned it when no cameras were rolling, when I was walking into jail cells to explain legal rights to people who couldn't afford a lawyer. When I faced down biased prosecutors who told me to my face that some kids just belong in prison. She pulled out another document, a legal brief she'd offered in a 2015 civil rights case that forced a Texas police department to change its racial profiling policy. She laid it on the desk, gently. This isn't about personality. It's about policy. And while you might have a gavel and a TV crew, I have receipts. And a responsibility. Then came the moment that crystallized it all. Crockett held up a highlighted passage from the Supreme Court's 1927 ruling in McGrain v. Dofkin. If this court ruled that Congress has the duty, not just the right, to conduct oversight of other branches of government. That includes questioning judges. That includes investigating ethics. That includes speaking truth to power, even when power doesn't want to hear it. She looked Judy straight in the eye. So when you question my generation, I want you to remember something. We're not trying to be the next you. We're trying to clean up what your generation left broken. There were no gasps this time, just stunned silence. Jasmine Crockett didn't raise her voice. She didn't slam the table. But with history, law, and lived experience behind her, she turned what could have been an insult into a national indictment. Not of a person, but of a mindset. And in doing so, she didn't just win the room. She redefined what power looked like. Judge Judy sat frozen for a moment, her hand still resting near her gavel. But she didn't lift it. For the first time in the taping, the air felt less like a set and more like a courtroomer. One where the authority had, quietly, shifted. Jasmine Crockett didn't move from her seat, but the weight of her words hung like a verdict. She leaned slightly forward, voice steady, every syllable deliberate. Respect isn't about who talks the loudest, who's been around the longest, or who has the flashiest set. It's not granted by age, money, or ratings. It's earned by service. It's earned by standing up for those who can't stand for themselves. Then she reached into her folder one last time. Out came a small, worn copy of the U.S. Constitution, dog-eared, highlighted, annotated in the margins. She placed it gently on the desk between them. You scream, Crockett said calmly. I investigate. One of those is public service, the other is theater. The room went absolutely still. Judy tried to speak, but nothing came out. Crockett didn't smirk. She didn't gloat. She simply held her ground, the same way she had in 1,000 real courtrooms. This wasn't about applause. It was about truth. I didn't come here to win an argument, she said, almost softly. I came to remind people that we don't bow to robes. We bow to the Constitution. And when someone tries to blur that line, no matter how powerful, no matter how beloved, we draw it again. The moment when a TV icon, long known for owning every room she walked into, found herself outmatched not by attitude, but by knowledge. Not by theatrics, but by principle. Jasmine Crockett didn't rise. She didn't need to. The room rose around her. Some in the audience stood, unsure if they should clap. Some were already reaching for their phones. Cameras had captured it all. A courtroom-style takedown, not with shouting or humiliation, but with citations, precedent, and the steely calm of someone who had argued tougher cases before judges who didn't smile for television. Judge Judy sat back. Her voice, if it returned, didn't matter anymore. What mattered was already happening outside the room. The clip would be uploaded within the hour. The hashtags would explode within minutes. Smells Judge Judy. Constitutional clapback. She brought the law. Cable news would loop the moment where Crockett dropped the Constitution between them like a mic. Late-night hosts would replay the "You scream, I investigate" line to standing ovations. Law professors would ask their students to analyze the moment, and millions of Americans from both parties would sit up and take notice, not just of Crockett's style, but of her substance. It was a flip, a shift, a generational, cultural, and constitutional pivot that reminded the country who the real power belongs to. Not personalities, but principles. And Crockett? She didn't revel. She didn't even smile. She simply closed her folder, nodded to the judge, and said, "I yield my time." America didn't just witness a confrontation. They witnessed a recalibration. The video hit 10 million views in under 24 hours. No graphics, no music. Just the raw confrontation between a legendary television judge and a congresswoman armed with the Constitution. The moment Jasmine Crockett dropped the line, "You're a judge on set, I'm a lawmaker in Congress," echoed across every corner of the internet. It wasn't just a clapback. It was a seismic shift in how America views power and performance. On TikTok, creators stitched Crockett's takedown with slow-motion edits and reaction shots. One viral clip used audio from courtroom dramas, cutting between Crockett's calm delivery and Judge Judy's stunned silence. Hashtags exploded. Jasmine vs. Judy, constitutional clapback, and the most popular prize earned. Twitter threads broke down every detail of the exchange, frame by frame. Some users focused on Crockett's legal citations. Others analyzed Judge Judy's facial expressions as authority slipped from her grip. Legal Twitter lit up. Dozens of law professors called it a constitutional masterclass. A Harvard constitutional law lecturer tweeted, "This moment will be shown in civics classes for the next decade." Civil rights attorneys praised Crockett's poise, noting how she avoided theatrics and let the law speak for itself. Students shared how it reignited their passion for public service. Memes flooded Instagram. One showed Crockett holding the Constitution like a sword. Another zoomed in on Judy's shocked expression with the caption, "When a TV judge meets a real constitutional scholar." YouTube creators released breakdowns within hours, titling videos how Crockett flipped the courtroom and Judge Judy just got schooled. Each reaction only added to the fire. What made it truly viral wasn't rage, it was control. Crockett never raised her voice. She didn't storm or shout. She dismantled with facts. In a world addicted to spectacle, she proved that preparation still matters. The audience didn't cheer because she humiliated Judge Judy. They cheered because she showed exactly how power should be held to account. Not with noise, with knowledge. And for the first time in years, Judge Judy wasn't the one delivering the verdict. The people were, and they'd already made up their minds. What followed wasn't just social media buzz, it was a cultural shift. Within 48 hours, Harvard Law School updated its constitutional law syllabus to include the clip. A professor tweeted, "Jasmine Crockett just gave the clearest live explanation of Article 1 oversight I've ever seen. My students need to see this." Dozens of law schools followed suit, sharing lessons from larger precision and professionalism under pressure. The American Bar Association posted a rare public statement. Congresswoman Crockett's performance was a reminder that legal clarity, respect, and preparation are the foundation of public service. We commend her articulation of constitutional oversight. CNN ran a special titled Constitutional Showdown, When TV Met Truth. MSNBC, PBS, and even NPR aired segments asking if Crockett had just changed how the public understands civic power. Judge Judy herself issued a statement, brief but enough to make headlines. "I underestimated her. That won't happen again." It was the closest she had ever come to admitting defeat. For a woman who had made a career out of cutting down challengers in seconds, this time, silence spoke volumes. Crockett, meanwhile, wasn't celebrating. She turned down multiple requests to host her own legal commentary show. "I'm not interested in being famous for putting someone in their place. I'm interested in putting the Constitution back in its place, at the center of how we govern." The humility only elevated her further. Publishers offered her a book deal by week's end. The title that trended among fans? "Respect Isn't Owed." Young women, especially black women, flooded Crockett's DMs and comment sections with stories of how they felt seen, heard, and represented. One wrote, "I watched you hold your ground, and I finally believe I can go to law school." Another, "Thank you for proving that strength can be quiet, but unshakable." In politics, performance is often mistaken for leadership. Crockett reminded the nation that real leadership starts with knowing the rules and being brave enough to challenge those who break them. In that courtroom, the robe didn't win. The Constitution did. It wasn't just a viral TV moment. It was a rupture in America's understanding of authority. What happened between Judge Judy and Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett didn't just entertain. It educated. And more importantly, it exposed a truth many had forgotten. Authority isn't something you inherit, perform, or demand. It's something you earn every day by knowing the law and standing by the people it's meant to serve. Judge Judy revealed what happens when old power gets uncomfortable. Crockett revealed what happens when new leadership doesn't flinch. For the first time in her storied career, the queen of courtroom television lost control. Not because she was shouted down, but because someone younger, better prepared, and grounded in constitutional truth stood firm. Law schools now refer to the exchange as the Crockett cross-exam. It's taught not as a moment of viral confrontation, but as a masterclass in civics. Congressional oversight gained renewed national attention. Voter registration surged among young Americans, and across the country a generation realized, you don't need a gavel to demand accountability, you just need the facts and the courage to deliver them. The legacy is undeniable. Jasmine Crockett didn't just respond to power. She redefined what it should look like. She proved that professionalism doesn't mean submission, that calm isn't weakness, and that truth, when spoken clearly and without fear, can silence even the loudest voice in the room. As Crockett said before yielding the floor, never confuse silence with submission, or robes with righteousness. That's a line America won't forget, not because it was loud, but because it was true. So now we turn to you. Do you believe that public officials, even judges, should face real-time questioning and public oversight? Should our democracy include accountability not just for politicians, but for those who interpret the laws that govern us all? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. We want to hear from you. And if you believe truth should always come with a microphone, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this video. Next up, the Supreme Court leak that stunned even the White House. You won't want to miss it.